Welcome once again to the People of the Free Gift podcast, where we ground believers in their identity in Christ and equip them to reach out to those caught in religion. We're glad you joined us. My name is Jason Oakes. I'm the pastor here, but in my other life, I have a ministry that's gone back to when I was in high school, and my best friend was part of a cult. And in the efforts to try and reach him with the genuine gospel, God got a hold of my heart, and it's been kind of an obsession of mine ever since. And it's really something that is a strong passion, and I believe even a calling of sorts in my life. And so today I didn't want to talk about who are cults, what is a cult. If you want more information, go to my website. I have lots of stuff on that. And hopefully sooner rather than later, I'll have an actual book that'll cover all that kind of stuff that'll be available to you. But rather, I wanted to focus, and the bulk of my ministry is focused on how do you actually engage people that are heavily entrenched in religion. And that makes it even broader because there's a lot of Christians that are entrenched in religion. And so I have 6 tactics that I really teach more in depth, but I want to talk about 3 of those today. And the first tactic I want to address, and these are based off of the 6 conversations that I literally have all the time, over and over, constantly. And so the first conversation is this, and maybe you've experienced this. Somebody knocks on your door, and they are representatives of a particular church, and they, in the course of conversation, they utter the phrase, "Well, you're a Christian? That's great. I'm a Christian too." Maybe it's even a confrontational type, and I've encountered this. "Oh, you don't think we're Christians, do you?" Now, if you've ever encountered this, it's kind of an awkward moment in which you're kind of taken back and you're thinking, okay, I don't want to immediately offend them and cut off the conversation, but at the same time, I want to tell the truth. So what do I do? So here's a tactic that I have come up with. I've just changed my perspective on what just happened. When they say that phrase, "I'm a Christian too," what they have just said in my brain is, Jesus is our common ground. And so I'm going to take them at their word, and I invite them, and I say, "Oh, that's great. I would love to sit down with you and talk about what Jesus taught. Would you want to do that with me?" And a lot of times they're willing to at least start the dialogue. And what I have found is that most of these people are very well-intentioned, very well-meaning, very sincere. They really believe that they are followers of Jesus Christ, that they really believe that they're following his teaching, and that means that they need to be a part of the group that they're a part of. And so as we get into this, now Jesus in the Gospels addresses a lot of different things. And in my upcoming book, I go through all of the Gospels, and I bring out things for all the different groups. But he deals with issues of authority, afterlife, the Trinity. But I want to talk about grace. And I'm going to kind of focus a lot of my talks today on grace. And what did Jesus actually teach? Now, I don't know about you, but we've been going through in this church, I've been preaching through the Gospels for about a year, and I think we have about a year left to get through all 4 Gospels. And my conception going into the Gospels is I've always been told that Jesus was kind of the intermediary between the Old Testament and the New Testament. That he didn't really fully preach grace, but he was kind of preaching the law and introducing or subtly suggesting grace. But as we've been getting into this, I have found that Jesus really, full throttle taught grace. Absolutely, without question, he taught grace. So I want to tell you some scriptures that you can jot down and places that you can take them to in the Gospels where Jesus taught grace. Now, the previous conception about Jesus in the Gospels that is so prominent, the reason is because Jesus sometimes did teach law. And the reason, though, that he taught law, I think we misunderstand. And I'll give you an example. In Matthew 5:48, this sums up the Sermon on the Mount when he says, "Be ye therefore perfect, even as your Father which is in heaven is perfect." Now, those who are in religious groups, they love this verse, but I don't know why they love this verse, because if you just turn it right around them and ask them, well, how are you doing with that? Nobody, and what you'll find is that they start redefining sin and what it means to be perfect, or the time frame that's allotted to meet this requirement. And, they're on their way and they believe that they're on their way and someday they'll get there. And you can even challenge them a little bit further and ask, do you know anybody who has done this? They don't. And even they may go back to like the founding prophet of their church or something like that, and they might believe that they somehow attained to this. But they don't know. As much as there might be somebody in their church that they look to and they admire, they don't know anybody who's actually done this. Another example would be Mark 12:30, the greatest commandment. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and all your strength. This is the first commandment. Well, is anybody actually doing this? No, we're not doing this. As much as we may want to and we try, we're not doing this. The reason why Jesus taught law is because he wanted, when he said these things, he wanted us to say, I can't do that. I can't do that. We tap out, and as soon as you tap out, then Jesus says, then come unto me. Believe in me. Rest in me. Okay, but oftentimes when Jesus says that, he's waiting for that response from the Pharisees, and it never comes. It never comes. They never tap out. They just continue hating him and persecuting him and eventually just want to kill him. So let's get into the grace side. When did Jesus teach grace? Well, did you know that there's 2 times in the Gospels where Jesus, in Luke 7:50 and Luke 18:42, Jesus says to 2 separate individuals, your faith has saved you. Your faith has saved you. That is about as direct of the message of salvation by grace through faith as you can get. But how about this? A question you can ask them is, do you want God's justice or do you want his mercy? And I think a lot of them would say initially, they'd be thinking, I want his justice. But nobody wants God's justice. And Jesus in Luke 18:10-14, he tells a story of 2 men who go to the temple. One is a Pharisee and one's a tax collector. And the Pharisee, he looks over the tax collector and it says he prays to himself, which I think is really interesting. And he says, I'm so thankful that I'm not like that tax collector. I'm so thankful that I give and I serve and I'm diligent about my relationship with you, God. I'm so thankful. And then Jesus says that he pans over to the tax collector, and the tax collector just beats his chest and he says, Lord, be merciful to me. I'm a sinner. And Jesus says, who went away from there justified? It was the tax collector. So another question you can ask, is it our work or is it God's work? Ultimately, when you come before God, are you coming on your own merits or do you believe you're coming on his merits? In John 6:28, there was a group of people, they came to Jesus and they asked, what shall we do that we might work the works of God? Here's Jesus' answer. This is the work of God, that you believe on him who he has sent. And so you can just take the last part of that and say all that he says to do is believe. That's it. But the first part's even more profound because he says this is God's work. Believing in Jesus Christ isn't even something that we do. It's something that God allows us to do, and we receive the gift that he wants to give us. Now, you can take them to relationships. In the middle of the Lord's Prayer, Jesus throws in, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And the flip is also said by Paul many times. Forgive as Christ has forgiven you. Love as God has loved you. And it always starts with God. God is the model, and then we follow suit and do what God does. And so you can ask them, if somebody does something that offends you, and they come to you and they say, I'm sorry, can you forgive them? And they would say, oh, well, yeah, I can forgive them. But here's the catch. If they were to handle that situation the way that they believe God handles that situation, they couldn't forgive their friend. They couldn't forgive their friend until their friend had actually died without ever doing that thing again. See, they know how to function relationally and in life situations, and they understand these things, but then when they project them onto God, there's a disconnect. Another question you can ask him, are you a good person? And then you can take him to Matthew 7:17, when Jesus says, even so every good tree brings forth good fruit, but a corrupt tree brings forth evil fruit. A good tree cannot bring forth evil fruit, neither can a corrupt tree bring forth good fruit. Jesus says there's two kinds of trees. There's good trees and there's bad trees. Bad news, you're bad. Apart from him, before you come to a relationship with him, you're a bad tree, and you can only bring forth bad fruit. The only way, check Genesis to Revelation, the only way that anything ever becomes good is God calls it good. And the last question, have you entered into his rest? Matthew 11:28, Jesus says, come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. And the author of Hebrews spends a few chapters on this whole idea of entering into the rest of God. And in that, there's a verse where it says that he who has entered into his rest has ceased from his labors. And you know what I found when I actually looked into the Greek in this word rest, and what Jesus is actually more literally saying? Come unto me, all you who are heavy and are burdened in labor, and I will cause you to cease from your labors and to cease striving and to enter into my rest. And we'll get more into this in the coming sections, to continue working to earn God's favor means that he can't give it to you. He only gives it. You can't earn it. And if you're trying to earn it, he can't give it to you. I just want to encourage you, if you haven't already, please like, subscribe, and share this video with others and this channel with others. It helps every time you do that. It actually helps the channel out financially, and it helps us to grow and get in front of others. If you want to connect with us, we invite you to join the conversation, facebook.com/People of the Free Gift. And until next time, this is Jason from People of the Free Gift, signing off.